Mr. Kmitch for 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, your department tabled documents with Parliament that show that 4.9 million visas are going to expire between September 2024 and December 2025. How will we know how many of those actually wind up leaving?
As you noted, MP Kmitch, when people come here, in many of their visa documents, they undertake to leave. As part of the Levels plan, there will be some visas that are temporary in nature that will not be renewed, and those people, when they undertook to come here, will be expected to leave, and that is simply a fact. We'll have to monitor that carefully. There are many measures within our department to monitor these things, but it's one that,
Minister,
given the volume in question, it's something that we'll have to be very careful in supervising.
1 second, Mr. Kmitch, I stop the work. Let him finish, and you can ask. Would appreciate that. Okay, so I'll go to Minister. You have finished your remarks. Okay, Honourable Member Kmitch, please.
Minister, I wasn't asking about whether they will leave or not. I'm asking you how will you ensure that a person whose visa has expired will leave? We know that just on study permits, there are 766,000 expiring by the end of December 2025. How will your department ensure that at the end of those study permit periods, those persons will leave?
Again, there are many ways that people leave the country, Tom. The vast majority leave voluntarily, and that's what's expected.
So explain those ways. How will you ensure it?
We work with our partners, including CBSA, to investigate, obviously, and prosecute those who violate immigration law. If someone refuses to leave, they're in violation of the law. And CBSA, after due process, has the legal obligation to remove people. Again, this isn't something that is taken lightly, but in the vast majority of cases, those people that have come here temporarily and do not have the right to stay, in fact, leave.
So then my next question will be, your plan calls for a cap on international students, 485,000 2024, 437,000 2025. There's been adjustments to those. So obviously there's a discrepancy between the two. So how many do you project will leave the country then at the end of December 2025? All 766,000? What's the proportion? What are the forecasts the department has?
You'll have to be clear on that. A discrepancy between what and what?
Between the number of people who will be allowed into the country and then the number of people who will be on a study permit that's expiring. So those who are expiring the end of December 2025, how many of them will actually leave? Are you saying 100% will be expected to leave, or are you going to send CBSA to chase all 766,000?
You know that is not what happens. There are a number of things that occur. Some people actually get renewals. Some people get postgraduate work permits and stay a longer period. And we do work with CBSA to monitor these things. And when Statistics Canada reports on these, they take into account a whole variety of factors in estimating how many people are here and how many people have left.
So at the end of this year, 2024, how many international students do you expect to leave, and how many have left so far when their study permits expired?
How many have left as of November today? We don't have that number.
October 1st. Can you provide those to the committee?
I don't know. We could look into it.
Minister, how can you not know? It's in the immigration levels plan. There's a bunch of charts on page 22 starting about temporary resident immigration to Canada, persons who are in the country. It's in the immigration levels plan. It's in there. So how can you not know what that number would be? There's an order paper question, these government documents that were signed by your parliamentary secretary that were tabled with Parliament that has the numbers. So there's supposed to be expiring study permits in December, 84,642. And then in November, 36,130. In October, 10,182. In the month before, 127,348. So how many of those people are still in the country? How many have received the renewal? And how many of them have CBSA now looking at them?
What I can provide to you as a number is the expected decrease over that period over the 3-year period, which is about 450 the first year, 450 the next year. That's net, incoming and outcoming. with a slight increase in 2027.
So again, so how are you going to track then those whose work permits are expiring by the end of 2025? Again, it's in the hundreds of thousands. You're not giving me much confidence or Canadians confidence that you have a plan, because we have a breakdown by month how many student visas and work visas are expiring, and you haven't provided any information on the means. How are you going to do it? You say you have partner organizations, you're working with people. What are you actually doing? What's the process? How are you going to ensure people abide by the visa conditions?
As I said to you before, just like the vast majority of people that come to the country on a temporary basis, the vast majority leave. In some cases, increasingly many, I will concede, people decide to choose. They are in a situation of irregularity in that case. Once they have exhausted their remedies, they are removed by CBSA.
Well, that's interesting, because you've made public statements repeatedly claiming and saying and alleging, based on IRCC data, that that is not what's going on. And that's why the IRB now has a record number of backlogged applications for asylum. And you have said that tens of thousands of them are actually international students who are staying longer to applying for asylum. And you're claiming they don't have a legitimate claim to make. That those are your quotes, the headlines you're generating by doing communications out there. So are you saying you don't have a plan, that this is part of your plan to have an increasing backlog at the IRB to deal with it?
Thank you. The time is up, but Minister, you please respond.
There are an increasing number of international students making asylum claims, I think with very little hope, given their conditions. They, whether you like it or not, are entitled to a form of due process in this country. I don't think you would purport to deny it to them. Are there things we can do to make sure that's more streamlined? I would encourage you to follow the next few weeks as we propose more amendments to the immigration system and the asylum system. But let's recall that every party in this House, except for the Liberal Party, voted down our asylum reforms in the budget. A bit shameful, considering that Conservatives had proposed these in earlier years, but you chose to play politics about it. This is a system that is in need of reform, and it's in need of reform in the right way.
Thank you. MP Khanna, please go ahead for 6 minutes. Oh, 5 minutes, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister, a few weeks ago, the Prime Minister put out a great video or propaganda piece that he was trying to outline his future plans. He mentioned bad actors. It's been about 2 weeks since that video has come out. Can you elaborate on who those bad actors are?
There are, as you know, because you're familiar with some of them, MP Khanna, immigration consultants that do not act properly and are giving false advice to people in the false hope of being able to stay here. There are institutions, for example, that are relying on international students and not providing the proper education and making false promises about their prospective employment. There are, in the labor market impact assessment world that I know you're familiar with, there's a lot of money exchanging hands where a labor market impact assessment shouldn't cost anything. So there's lots of people that are responsible here. It isn't simply about people that have committed fraud. It's about the ecosystem as well that's been created, which has been an incentive and it may be a $31 billion industry when it comes to international students, but chasing short-term gain with a lot of long-term pain. And I mentioned that earlier with respect to the cost of what asylum seekers would cost coming out of an international student system that was supposed to breed excellence and not asylum claims.
Okay, and are you missing anyone else off that list? I know it's been a while, but anyone else you're missing that you think should be considered a bad actor?
I know you have your view on it, so why don't you share it?
Well, it's a simple question. Since 2015, who was in charge of the federal government that increased temporary foreign worker permits by 154%?
I want to say that the federal government has responsibility here. It is a much broader analysis than simply putting it on the shoulders of one institution, but it is important for the federal government. Maybe I can finish my thought. It is important for the government to acknowledge that we could have gotten things right in many measures. There is a conundrum that comes with any immigration program, and one of those is the impact that this has had, these immigration plans, pretty much regardless of category, on making the labor force younger, on increasing the GDP of this country, extremely important coming out of COVID with structural challenges in the supply chain. There are some people who temporarily that made sure that we didn't get through, that we got through a recession, and that's important to note. The economy has been fueled by immigration, but again, it is not an unlimited supply, and any responsible government, like the federal government, has to make sure that it is managing and controlling a system in the volumes that are acceptable to Canada.
So who was responsible for the 211% increase we saw when it came to international students since 2015? Who was the government in charge that signed off on that?
Those are two different questions. We are responsible for putting together an international student program that institutions leveraged and abused to some extent in the volume of people that they brought in. Let me also say this, and you know this, the federal government is the only one that doesn't make any money directly from this. The provincial government, Ontario, for example, makes about $1,000 a head on every international student and has abused this system in bringing in people to study at institutions, some very reputable, some that are the pride of this country, but some that pretty much didn't exist. And so that's something we've had to rein in. You can just speak yourself to Mayor Brown about what he's living through in Brampton, and I think you would know exactly who I'm talking about.
Minister, it looks like you're passing the buck and you're blaming other bad actors, but the population growth we saw of 300%, the highest it's ever been since 1950s, is a federal responsibility. You are the one that is signing off on these approvals. It is your government that is responsible for this, but it looks like to me that you're just literally pointing fingers at everyone else but yourself and your predecessors in Canada. Do you not think it's right for you to take some responsibility for these actions that have taken place? Do you not? Shouldn't you go put Mark or Sean Fraser on the list as well of some of those bad actors that have been a part of the problem?
Sean Fraser is one of the guys who counseled me to do this, and we all bear our.
So after creating the problem,
there's lots of responsibility to go around, Arpan, and I think you'll know that. Immigration is a shared responsibility. Provinces, institutions of various descriptions come to us and ask us for different programs. We have a very important role in making sure that we get it right, and that's why I introduced the measures that I did last year with another wave in the fall, in addition to the levels plan that is the subject of conversation today.
Minister, how many permanent residents do you expect in the next 3 years?
I expect what's in the levels plan. So 395,000 next year, a reduction of 105,000, 380 the next, and the year after that, 365,000.
And how many temporary resident permits do you expect to issue in those 3 years?
You can look in the levels plan for that.
I'm asking you, Minister.
It's in the levels plan.
I'm asking you for those numbers, Minister.
Look in the levels plan.
Do you not know the numbers?
I know the numbers.
Then what are the numbers?
How much time do we have?
Lots of time, Minister. Lots of time. What's
You're
the
not
numbers?
the chair, Larpan.
2 minutes, Minister. We still have 2 minutes to the round.
We'll look in the levels plan. Harpreet, if you have that, feel free to share, or we can actually table those. I can.
It's okay. Just give me the answer. It's okay.
No, he said new ones. So the target for 2025 is 673,650. For 2026, 516,600, and in 2027, 543,000 permits.
So if you do the math, so we're expecting probably 3 million people coming to Canada in the next 3 years, both permanent and temporary residents, correct?
Again, if you need to be able to look at what the net population increase is for that period of time, and for the next 2 years, it'll be reductions with an increase over the next year.
Last week, your officials confirmed to us that you're seeing skyrocketing refugee asylum claims with a wait time of 44 months for some of them. What are you doing to bring those numbers down in terms of wait times and to make sure that these cases are heard as soon as possible?
Well, if you looked in the last budgetary exercise, we put a substantial amount of money in making sure the IRB could process more volume. It's, they are an independent body, so there's only so much pressure that we can exert on them. They do a great job, but with the volume that we're seeing, they are admittedly heavily charged with the numbers of cases that they're seeing. I put forth a package, and you would know this because your party rejected it in the last budgetary exercise to reform the asylum system, but you all sat there and smiled and shot it down with the Bloc and the NDP. So I plan to put forward more measures. I want to reform the system. It's not working in the way it should. That's a function of volume, but also a function of efficiency. The growing claims that we see now inland are not unexpected. They're ones that we saw with people having increasingly fewer hopes to stay in Canada and being counseled to file, I think unjustly, asylum claims where they don't, where they shouldn't have the ability to do so.
Thank you very much. Floor is with Mr. Radikoff for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to officials. So you're requesting $1.2 billion of extra money in this update. And of course, this is for an immigration system described by your very government as a mess. Out of the $1.2 billion, $1.1 billion is for asylum seekers, people that have crossed our broken and weak border. And I want to understand exactly what benefits asylum seekers get. So if an asylum claimant arrives at the Montreal airport, will IRCC pay them for a hotel?
Deputy Minister.
So, Chair, the way the asylum system works is that as soon as there is a claim on asylum, it is assessed by CBSA or IRCC, depending upon where the claim is, and accordingly established as basis of claim.
So the hotel is covered then? Is that what you're saying? Once the claim has been applied, once they've applied?
So if there is in Montreal, I'm just giving you a full answer about this. If there is in Quebec, there is a possibility that Prada will probably house up to 1,150, and if there is an overflow, we will house them in the hotel.
Do they receive a food allowance?
I think Su Yang, if you can.
Yeah, thank you. So it is not an automatic allowance that asylum claimants would get just because you are an asylum claimant. There is the right to claim asylum, and then they would have to identify whether or not they need shelter. And as part of that, if they end up in an IRCC hotel, then there would be food as part of being at the hotel.
Okay, so they can get food. What about transportation? Is there furniture? Is there household items allowance as well?
No, that would not be covered because they are in the hotels, so there's no furniture that would be required.
Are asylum claimants eligible for, Deputy Minister, for health benefits?
Deputy Minister.
Yes, the asylum claimants are eligible for the first 3 months as for the interim federal health program, and then it is determined whether the provinces will further give them the necessary coverage.
So does that cover things? Obviously, covers primary health care. Does it cover things like glasses, dental work, that sort of thing?
It has a very specific primary care component. It does not have, I don't have the details on hand, Chair, which I can say that it is true that dental or glasses are covered, but the primary thing is covered.
We heard last week that it takes 44 months to process an asylum claim at the IRB. How much of today's new spending is going towards the Immigration Refugee Board to speed up the asylum claim processing?
So, Chair, the IRB has a separate kind of allowance, which is appropriated by the minister, and they are a quasi-judicial organization, and they have had their own money. To us, our connection to them is to prepare the files and give it to them for further assessment.
Okay, so you don't know. I understand. There's no money, no extra money's gone to the IRB to process, just try to speed up claims in this supplemental estimate system. Talking about asylum seekers, how many asylum seekers in the queue are former international students?
I think at the risk of quoting a number, I think what has been seen lately is that there is there's been an uptick of students who are actually seeking asylum compared to 2023.
I guess I'm looking for a number. Do you not know the number that are students?
Not on hand, Chair, and we can provide.
So you wouldn't know how many arrived as international students or who were originally international students and you wouldn't know those numbers?
We would actually know that we would know how many have arrived, and the actual point is that if we count who have actually exhausted their postgraduate work permit and then have applied, or the ones which have which are the students who have, without even completion of their study, they have applied. So we'll have to separate them out.
So if you could provide this to the committee, how many arrived as international students? How many were originally international students but then transitioned to the postgraduate work program? And also how many transitioned to some other stream? So how many asylum claimants were students but transitioned to another stream? If you could do that within the next 2 weeks, that would be great. Thank you. And is it true that asylum claimants also get a work permit?
Yes. Chair, that it is true that they get work permit.
So does this policy incentivize people to claim asylum in order to be able to work in Canada legally?
We actually have a policy where we allow the asylum claimant, while their asylum claim is being processed, that they are able to support themselves and integrate in the society, and that is why it is meant for that. It's not supposed to be a pull factor.
Your department previously released asylum claims by designated learning institutions up to 2022, and the total was less than 5,000 for that year, and of course now we're seeing more than that every month. Can you table with this committee the updated numbers to that table, so asylum claimants by designated learning institution up to the end of October 2024?
The students? Okay, we will actually go back and try to get that information.
And just to be clear, I'm referring to a report that you published a couple of years ago. It was that's the information it had, and I would just like it to be updated. And if you could provide that within the next 2 weeks, that would be great.
15 seconds.